Citizen Snitch. That's right, Citizen Snitch. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials and the Millennial. Joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. He's right over there. Hey, Christopher, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Who is also recently engaged. I know we said this the other day, but if you missed it on the other podcast, he was recently engaged after a visit to Florida and got engaged with his high school sweetheart and college sweetheart. And that happened in what part of Florida?
Panama City Beach.
Panama City Beach, a beautiful part of Florida. So congratulations, of course. So ladies and gentlemen, this podcast is called Citizen Snitch. Yes. Part of the control of Marxist societies is about getting children to be ideologues and brainwashing them and turning children and adults, certainly the children when they become adults, but you need to start young naturally before they actually have an open mind and, before they actually get critical thinking skills. You need to brainwash them and turn them into snitches. And so the left in the United States of America wants to have Citizen Snitch. And I'm also calling this Beware of the Climate Zombies. So Citizen Snitch, well, Merrick Garland, the United States Attorney General, he had a press conference, and the United States Attorney General, Merrick Garland, is creating, folks, this is not created by statute. This is created by basically somebody who's part of the cabinet, the Office of Environmental Justice. Yes, environmental justice. That's the latest climate term, right? So we have climate change, we have the climate zombies, and then now we have the Office of Environmental Justice, because now we're going to turn climate change into a racial issue. They've been up to this for a while, especially in blue states. Trust me, this is something I know very well in the state of Maryland, because they have done the exact same thing. They are clearly coordinating in Maryland with the Biden administration, as are the other blue states, particularly California. Maryland is probably the most like California, in my opinion, than any other state. But good old Merrick Garland wants to do that. And what's interesting is this particular article that came out, and it's in a number of different papers, but we also have a clip for you to prove to you that it's real. It says here, not content with the Ministry of Truth to monitor, suppress, and censor public speech, and in addition to weaponizing federal agents to spy on parents as domestic terrorists and tracking cell phones for compliance with government mandates, the Biden administration on Thursday unveiled its Office of Environmental Justice. Chief of Green Police Patrol, Merrick Garland, Green Police Patrol, I like that, I'm going to have to start using that, said that the latest expansion of the Biden regime's reach is consistent with the president's executive order tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. To that end, Garland said his Justice Department's new Office of Environmental Justice is issuing a comprehensive environmental justice enforcement strategy. Did you hear that, folks? An enforcement strategy. So that's what you have to be worried about. What will that enforcement strategy be? What will it look like? And now it's going to be federalized. A prime focus for the new office will be to help redistribute wealth to areas and communities that leftist politicians think have been targeted by systemic racism. Now, rather than continuing to read this article, you get the gist of what this is all about. We're going to talk about it more in a minute after the clip. But first, I should tell you that Young Americans for Liberty, they actually tweeted out, the DOJ is creating the Office of Environmental Justice. And just like that, we're one step closer to a Chinese-style social credit system. Owen Evans tweets out, Office of Environmental Justice, note the social movement language, critical theory approach for aggressive climate change agenda in the USA. Prioritize the cases that will have the greatest impact on the communities most overburdened. And that is from, and it was tweeted out by Owen Evans. So as you can tell, we have critical race theories in public schools across America. Now we're going to have critical race theory for the environment. Interesting. Also, Liberty First 1776 tweeted, Office of Environmental Justice, Disinformation Governance Board, 2 sham impeachments, spying on political opponents, treating parents as domestic terrorists, weaponizing the IRS and the FBI. But hey, Republicans are extremists and threats to democracy. Well, we're going to prove to you that this is all real. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the Attorney General of the United States in his press conference talking about the Office of Environmental Justice. We have the clip. Here it is.
I'm announcing 3 actions that the department is taking to advance environmental justice. First, consistent with the President's executive order on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, we are issuing a comprehensive environmental justice enforcement strategy. Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta will discuss that strategy in just a moment. Second, I'm pleased to announce that we are launching the Justice Department's first ever Office of Environmental Justice to oversee and help guide the Justice Department's wide-ranging environmental justice efforts. Like all parts of government, it will get its own acronym, OEJ. And third, the Justice Department is issuing an interim final rule that will restore the use of an important law enforcement tool, supplemental environmental projects, subject to new guidelines and limitations that I will also be issuing today. Administrator Regan and I know that the communities most impacted by environmental harm are not isolated in any one part of our country. Environmental crime and injustice touch communities in all our cities, towns, rural areas, and on tribal lands. Although violations of our environmental laws can happen anywhere, communities of color, indigenous communities, and low-income communities often bear the brunt of the harm caused by environmental crime, pollution, and climate change. They include communities, fence-line communities, where exposure to toxic air pollutants have caused scores of cancer-related deaths. They include communities where students have been exposed to harmful emissions from boilers in their public schools. They include communities where infectious diseases have spread because of inadequate wastewater management.
So let's get to this and take this apart, podcast listeners. That is AG Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, talking about and politicizing environmental pollution and environmental damage and turning it into environmental justice. Now, before we go to the environmental justice component of this, let's be really clear to the podcast listeners. If there is environmental damage, for example, and here's an example. In my home state, there are some, probably more than some, but some in particular, wastewater treatment plants that are actually run by government. And they are so poorly run that they routinely dump raw sewage into the waterways. Okay? Remember, these are government run. Despite billions upon billions of dollars collected from the taxpayers that was supposed to be directed for the purpose of fixing all of and modernizing to the best available technology those wastewater treatment plants, the money was, of course, used elsewhere. So we have that as an example, and I want to make very clear, we should make sure that we clean up areas that have been polluted. But the problem is that government is the biggest polluter. It is. Government is the biggest polluter. Certainly in my state it is. And the idea that environmental damage is only done to certain communities, communities where there are people that are black and brown, is utter nonsense. Because that's no different than Pete Buttigieg, right? He's weaponized his agency, the Department of Transportation, by saying, well, the only communities that are affected by roadways is those racist roads that go and highways that go through black and brown communities, as if roads are racist, which is utter nonsense. But this is what the Democrat Party has to do now. Everything is about turning an idea that really should be universal in terms of wanting to fix a problem like environmental damage, but instead turning it into a racial matter. Environmental justice, redistribution of wealth. And that's exactly what he just talked about. He said, well, first of all, we're going to have a Department of Environmental Justice. And it's going to be called the Office of Environmental Justice. And its job is to get an army of lawyers to basically sue the American people. They're not going to sue governments, by the way. They'll never do that, right? Why would they possibly sue the agency that runs the wastewater treatment plant to which I referred earlier? Of course, they're not going to do that because that's government. They will never do that. Instead, what they're going to do is to sue private individuals and also companies. That is the whole purpose of this. It is weaponizing and shaking down government, and they're going to use it as an opportunity to create young climate zombies. So we have the Civilian Conservation Corps that's been talked about, created, the Climate Conservation Corps, various names for this at different states, usually almost always blue states, as well as, of course, the federal government that the Democrats want to create. Well, the whole idea is to get kids as young as possible and to turn them into little ideologues and climate zombies so that they start going door to door and then snitching on people and say, well, the federal government just passed a bill that says you can no longer use engines with gasoline to cut your grass. You can't use leaf blowers, which we've talked about before. So therefore, I'm a snitch. I'm an 11-year-old snitch because I'm part of the Civilian Conservation Corps, the AKA climate zombies, and I'm going to tell the police and they're going to come and prosecute you because we made all of those illegal. That's what this is about. This is about complete statism and control. If it were really about cleaning up the environment, you know what we would do? We wouldn't create the Office of Environmental Justice because we already have laws in the books about polluting. We do. Of course we do. What we would do instead is just, clean up the pollution and spend the money on that. Like modernizing all of the wastewater treatment plants nationwide with the best available technology. And this is something I know a little bit about because I live in an area where we have a humongous estuary and it's beautiful. It's beautiful and it should be cleaner than it is. And it's not very clean despite billions and billions and billions of dollars spent. And the reason is that government takes your tax money and never puts it back to where they tell you where they're going to put it. And so if we just spent the money wisely, of course, I'm pretty sure the problem would be substantially solved. And of course, there is a need to let people know that you don't dump oil into the waterway. But guess what? That's already illegal. So what the Democrats have decided to do is to weaponize through the AG's office and through law enforcement the idea that if you pollute, right, or if you are doing something you're not supposed to be doing, like using a leaf blower because it's been outlawed because it's not an electric leaf blower, that the Office of Environmental Justice is going to come after you and they're going to penalize you. But guess what? If you do it in a community where Black and brown people live, it's going to be worse than that. You would have caused and committed a hate crime because you did it in a different community, a disadvantaged community. This is how weaponized. Can you imagine the founding fathers, what they would think of this? They would just go, this is not the function of government. It is the function of government to foster a clean environment and to educate people about that. But what they're trying to do is to weaponize government to turn it into black versus white about environmentalism. And that is utter nonsense because, folks, guess what? Do you know where the dirtiest communities are in the United States? They're in the cities. They're in the cities. The dirtiest places you can possibly live in the United States happens to be in the cities. Case in point, I'm going to read some of the comments on the article about good old Merrick Garland. It says from Chris Mercer, although violations of our environmental laws can happen anywhere, communities of color, indigenous communities, and low-income communities often bear the brunt of the harm caused by environmental crime, pollution, and climate change, Garland said. And then Chris Mercer goes on, well, basically they are saying that ghettos and major liberal cities where low-income people live are not pristine and clean like neighborhoods of people that work and keep their environment clean by not throwing beer cans, McDonald's bags, and half-eaten slop, cigarette butts, and human waste all over the streets and expecting someone else to come clean it up. And his point is, same old tired trope of putting lipstick on a pig that doesn't care or that they would clean it up themselves. Let's go, Brandon. Well said, right? Because this is Merrick Garland saying, and the Democrats saying, it's not fair that you live in nice areas. It's not fair that you actually take care of your environment. It's not fair that you have the coiffed lawn and that there isn't trash everywhere, like the McDonald's bags. Because when you do see it in your neighborhood, you know what you do? You pick it up and you throw it away. And that does happen, let's face it. But in the cities that Merrick Garland is talking about, he's saying, well, it's your fault that the people living there aren't taking care of their neighborhood. Utter nonsense, ladies and gentlemen, utter nonsense. And you can expect pretty soon, I predict within the next 3 to 5 years, someone's going to knock on your door and it's going to be a climate zombie telling you what you should be doing or not be doing on your property. And it's going to be so invasive that they're also going to want to come inside of your house to say the same thing of what you can or can't do inside of your house. Then what will you do? What will you do then? Time to fight back. And that is Citizen Snitch. Next up, podcast listeners, a debate that goes off the rails. That's not fair, Martha McCallum of Fox News said. She was forced to referee a debate as it goes off the rails in a live show. So just to set it up, Fox News anchor Martha McCallum was forced to step in and referee after a debate between guests Richard Goodstein and Pete Hegseth got heated. McCallum started the segment off with a question about President Joe Biden's harsh criticism of the recently leaked early opinion draft calling for landmark abortion cases Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey to be overturned, and what he called the ultra mega agenda. So she was just trying to have a conversation and a debate, a civil one, naturally, on Fox News. We have this clip. It's really worth listening to because it tells you where things are and how the Democrats are really desperate to find a message, which will segue us into the next segment about just that, how they're trying to find a message. So they put these people out front, like Goodstein out front to, kind of probe and figure out where he can find holes in the messaging. We had that clip and here it is.
Because, each state will get to decide, which means that the voter goes to the poll and says, how do you vote on the abortion referendum? And I can say this way or that way. And a bunch of people who work at the Supreme Court don't get to decide. I get to decide for my own self and for my own state with my vote.
Over a dozen states have already basically passed laws saying no exceptions, health of the mother, nothing. No rape, no incest, no exceptions. Those will have to be approved
by the people of the state with a vote.
That's already been done. They've already passed those laws pending Roe being overruled.
The people voted for those. You're the party that runs around yelling, democracy dies in darkness. Democracy is the people voting. The closest voting to the people is the most effective for
And Martha's question was, is that a way to reach independence? The answer is they are freaked out at the notion that those laws could become law.
You know what?
You're the party of defund the police. You're the party of open borders. You're the party of injecting.
And you're the party of bashing in police on this Capitol grounds.
Okay. No. You know what? It's not fair.
Nor is defund.
Nobody wants to see.
It is. Your party talks about all the time.
We're realists. We're like normal people, okay?
Yes,
we don't want, nobody wants to see a policeman's head bashed in.
By the way, that's not a true
Whether
story.
it's at the Capitol, I don't want to see police officers in Minneapolis chased out of their own precinct.
Right.
and driven away from their own precinct, I don't want to see that either. So, we have a fair forum here. So that's the way we're looking at it. But I'm gonna keep that because I want to see if you're right. Okay, when it comes time to vote, I want to see what independents actually do, and that's what's going to be so fascinating about watching this whole midterm process. Because how do they feel? What's more important to them, inflation or what is happening at the Supreme Court? And we will see. We will see what they decide. So we thank you for being here. We like to have panels that have both sides on them, Richard. So we do appreciate you being here.
I know that was a long clip, okay? I know it was a long clip, but we gave you that clip. We wanted you to listen to it in its entirety so that it was not unfairly cut. So you heard Richard Goodstein, of course, he's on the left, and he's basically saying, it's abortion, and that's going to cause people to go to the polls and so forth. And meanwhile, 70% of independents, 70% are not going to be voting for Joe Biden as of today, right? They're very, very unhappy. So the Democrats are trying to find some sort of way to message the independents because they know without the independents, they are going to get wiped out. And so they've got cancel the police, which of course Pete Hegseth was talking about, working against them, the economy working against them, inflation working against them, the overspending at the federal level working against them. And they're just hoping that, the whole abortion thing works in their favor. And so here's the thing. They're in search of a message, all right? And the Democrats are in a desperate search for a message. They have to use disinformation in order to find the message or in order to get the message to you. And so we have a couple of clips in this segment about what they are up to. So in the Daily Wire, what is he talking about? Peter Doocy asks why Biden thinks Republicans will segregate LGBTQ kids. Look, you can't believe how low the left is going with this. So Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy challenged Press Secretary Jen Psaki during Wednesday's press briefing, asking about a claim President Joe Biden had made earlier in the day. And so good old Peter Doocy, he's like the only person in the White House press corps who actually asks probing questions of the day. The rest of them are themselves zombies, media zombies. Oh, we're not going to ask any real questions. We're only asking the questions that Jen Psaki wants us to ask. So we have good old Peter Doocy asking the question and then Joe Biden responding. And it's just unbelievable how low these people are willing to go to try to find a message, which is really the purpose of this segment, to show you the Democrats are so bankrupt with ideas that they will do anything to find a message. And it's so obvious at this point that they are lying. So obvious. We have the clip. Here it is.
Well, that got struck down. Griswold was thought to be a bad decision by Bork, and my guess is the guy's on the Supreme Court now. What happens if you have a state changes the law saying that children who are LGBTQ can't be in classrooms with other children? Is that legit under the way that the decision is written? What are the next things that are going to be attacked? Because this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
So that's Joe Biden saying that, and referring to, of course, the Florida law, but laws elsewhere in the United States that are probably percolating in certain Republican legislatures, whereby you cannot teach gender identity in kindergarten. In Florida, it was pre-K to third grade that you couldn't do that. But Joe Biden, what does he do instead? He says, well, they're going to segregate in these states the LGBTQ plus children or children of LGBTQ plus parents. Now, of course, there are two things that are misinformation there. The first is that the children themselves in kindergarten are not LGBTQ plus children. They're just not. And the second thing is, which is kind of the inference, even though he didn't exactly say it that way, the inference is that, when you're in elementary school, you actually know that you're LGBTQ plus. Utter nonsense. And then the other disinformation used by Biden in his own words was that in Florida, Governor DeSantis is going to instruct people as a result of the bill passing that says that children will be segregated based on who their parents are. I mean, it's utter nonsense. It's utter nonsense. The bill is pretty simple, folks. It simply says that this kind of conversation is not appropriate with children. If you want to talk sex to your kindergartner and you're really into that, well, you know what? And as long as you're the parent, you can do that. You can do that at home. But in the classroom, doesn't belong there. Not in elementary school, it doesn't. And I think the vast majority of normal people in the United States, emphasis on normal, okay, realize that that is so. What do I mean by normal? I mean people who believe that children actually ought to have a childhood and that adult conversations should not be part of what you have with them, certainly not in elementary school about this subject. Let them be children, okay? That's what I mean by normal. But Joe Biden, of course, he's using disinformation and he's saying, you're going to segregate them. Once again, Democrat Party, the party of segregation, is saying that the Republicans who are trying to keep children innocent, because they are innocent in childhood, trying to give them an opportunity to maintain that innocence as long as possible. And Democrats, of course, the groomers, they are. It's the grooming party. You know, that's why they like Neverland Ranch, a.k.a. Disneyland and Disney World. That's the party that wants to have all these conversations as early as possible. That's the party that wants to have the children determine what their sexuality is and whether or not they're going to change their sexuality while they're in elementary school. Idiots. Absolute idiots. So there's a follow-up press conference. Peter Doocy, of course, asked Joe Biden that question. You heard the clip. So Peter Doocy was like scratching his head. It's like, you know what? I got to get some clarification on this. So later, I think it was the same day, Jen Psaki had a press conference with the White House press corps. Peter Doocy asked her, you know, can you clarify that just a little bit? We had that clip. Here it is.
The president said today, what happens if you have states change the law saying that children who are LGBTQ can't be in classrooms with other children? What is he talking about?
Well, I think, Peter, we've seen extreme laws that target LGBTQ families, their kids across the country. And I think what he's saying is we don't know what they're capable of given what they've already done to date.
Which state is trying to segregate LGBTQ children in the classroom?
Well, I think we've seen laws that are incredibly discriminatory. That's what the president's referring to. And the fact that he doesn't know what additional steps could be taken by extreme wings of the party that would rather divide rather than work on issues that the American people actually are focused on and actually.
So the extremists are the Republicans who believe that children should maintain their innocence. And the Democrats, they are the mainstream party who wants to have conversations with their kindergartner about going to drag queen, parties and changing their sex and determining the fact that they really are in the wrong body and that there's some other sex and telling them all about the birds and the bees as early as possible. It's just ridiculous. Once again, the use of misinformation by the Democrats for the sole purpose of trying to find a message because they are so bankrupt in their ideas. I mean, they are so dangerous in what they're trying to do to your children. Think I'm wrong? Well, here's proof, ladies and gentlemen. Not only did you just hear it in your own ear with your own ears, but here's proof. The top Biden health official, Dr. Rachel Levine, who's really a man, he's a guy, says all pediatricians agree with castrating gender-confused children. Let me read this. It's the Daily Caller. Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Rachel Levine, said in an interview released Friday that there is no medical debate about whether children who claim they are transgender should receive gender-affirming care. In an interview with NPR, of course, NPR, Levine, the first openly transgender individual, otherwise known as a guy who has a wig on, in American history to serve in a Senate-confirmed position, said that the medical industry has reached a consensus on the value of gender-affirming care for transgender children. Levine made the remarks ahead of a speech in Texas Saturday, which was aimed at encouraging training physicians to promote that care to young transgender people. There is no argument, quote, among medical professionals, said Dr. Levine. Pediatricians, pediatric endocrinologists, adolescent medicine physicians, adolescent psychiatrists, psychologists, etc., about the value and the importance of gender-affirming care. Levine said this when asked about a new fact sheet published by the Florida Department of Health advising against gender-affirming care for children. Okay? Talk about disinformation from the left. In Florida, there's a new fact sheet from the Department of Health advising against gender-affirming care for kids. Kids. Not adults, kids. You're an adult, do what you want. Do what Dr. Levine has done. You want to know why you can? Because you can. It's a free country. But now they want it for children. Gender-affirming care is a euphemism for treatments to facilitate the gender transition of an individual, such as the prescription of puberty blockers, hormone therapy, or sex reassignment surgery. Those treatments can leave a child sterile in adulthood and otherwise interfere with normal sexual development in the event they lose the desire to identify as their non-birth sex, which, by the way, up to 80% of gender-questioning youth do, according to a study cited by Florida's Health Department in its fact sheet. In other words, when these drugs, when the puberty blockers and when the prescription drugs and sex reassignment surgery occur in a child, up to 80% of them later on regret it because they were children. And yet Dr. Levine thinks it's okay. Levine also said that the bill's trying to curb the promotion of LGBT material in schools, such as Florida Parental Rights in Education bill, were an attack on LGBT youth. Once again, folks, LGBT youth, I can never catch up with that. Plus, minus, I don't know, in elementary school, okay? Or in middle school, upper, just nonsense, utter nonsense. And this is the Assistant Secretary of Health of the United States of America, the Assistant Secretary of Health, who's all in on not just training and teaching and engaging in ideological brainwashing of your elementary school children, but giving them drugs that stop their growth in, and I just don't understand it. I feel like I'm in outer space somewhere, that I visited some planet, with aliens, and this is what they're doing. And, have we been populated by aliens or something, Chris? I mean,
you can't get a tattoo until you're 18. You can't drink alcohol until you're 21. Like, these are all things put in place for children who can't make their own decisions because they're not fully formed yet. Like,
can't smoke until you're 21.
Can't smoke till you're 21. Like,
can't drink alcohol. Can't get a tattoo until you're 18.
Right.
And certainly, and I'm sure across the country, certainly it's federal law with tobacco and alcohol, I believe. And the fact, but you're right. But then some person that you don't even know, who's teaching you don't even know that they're telling your child this because they can keep it away from the parents with the conversations that they're having, is having conversation with your child that they can give them and counsel them.
Permanently change their bodies. Not to mention their minds. Mess up their minds. And, there you go. I mean, they're going to need lifelong mental health care because they were obviously given some sort of brainwashing session. And so that's why this isn't allowed, okay, in Florida. And this needs to happen across the country. And so in the Epic Times, proof be told, children's drag queen dance party draws outrage in New England. A government-run drag queen dance party for high school kids, government-run, by the way, has set off outrage among parents in an affluent seacoast New England community. By the way, you can have a drag queen dance party, and it can be a private party that is non-government sanctioned. Okay? Sure you can. Right? I presume as long as you have the permission of your parents, you can have such a party, I presume. But the fact that it's government run and government sanctioned, obviously that's a major issue because it's government that's trying to control every aspect of your child's life. Newburyport Mayor Sean Reardon did not return phone calls from the Epic Times about the event titled Over the Rainbow. They should have had that at Disneyland. However, Reardon tweeted on Friday that the event has been grossly mischaracterized by a handful of bad actors who are calling it things it is not. Newburyport City Council Bruce Vogel called those opposed to it viciously intolerant, telling one parent in an email, "You should move to a community that supports your intolerant views." That parent, Laurie Kench, is among dozens of parents who sent emails to the Epic Times and posted on Facebook and Twitter expressing their outrage over the event. The Massachusetts Family Institute, a statewide organization, also decried the city-run drag queen-hosted dance party. Quote, "Local municipalities should not be endorsing an adult sexualized entertainment for minors." Amen to that. MFI Director of Communications and Research, Mary Ellen Siegler, told the Epic Times, quote, This is crazy to be promoting someone in the adult entertainment business as a fun time for kids." Ha! There you go. It's crazy to be promoting someone in the adult entertainment business as a fun time for kids. The drag queen providing the entertainment for the 9th grade to 12th grade dance party goes by the same name as Ms. Diamond Wigfall. Ms. Diamond Wigfall. Wigfall, a biological male, no surprise there, performs at a variety of venues locally and nationally. He also posts videos of himself performing in drag. Now, folks, as a parent, are you really comfortable with a dude in a wig with the last name of Wigfall hanging out with your child? And why do you think such an individual would want to hang out with a teenager? Why? Okay? Why not would such an individual want to hang out, I don't know, with other adults? Well, because they'd rather hang out with teenagers. That's why. A month ago, Wigfall posted a video, in which he performs a racy dance while lip-syncing to a sexually explicit song called Coconuts. The song was recently released by Kim Petras, who last year released the album Slut Pop. In a December 2021 article by DIY magazine, is that how you say that? I guess it is. Petras said about her song Coconuts, I love writing something up. Dirty stuff. So there's a lot of slut on it. Wigfall also has several partially nude pictures of himself posted on his Instagram page, including completely nude and close-up photos of his butt. In an article published last month in Rainbow Times, Wigfall, who also goes by the name of AJ Fenway Parker, gave a detailed account of a performance during the New York City Pride Festival in which the leotard he was wearing came undone near his genitals. Quote, "The crotch on my leotard popped open and I was like, whatever, I'm going to keep going on from that point on. I always had a safety plan," he recalled with a laugh. The online magazine reported him as saying, Wigfall joked about it happening again at a later show. So obviously, it's not an accident. So why do you think this dude, Wigfall, would want to do this kind of shock kind of dancing and party in front of teenagers? Idiot parents! My gosh, idiot school, by the way, because the school, it was government sanctioned. In a 2018 article, Wigfall also quoted as saying that when he performs, he tries his best to keep toxic masculinity away from children. Yeah, that's it. Sure he does. That's why he that's why his package just kind of falls out in front of people, Wigfall did not respond to a request to comment. The Epic Times also reached out. So here's the takeaway, ladies and gentlemen, podcast land. Apparently, if you are a man, right, and you dress as a man because you are a man,
and you go in front of children, 9th to 12th graders who are children, and you pull out your package, I'm pretty sure you're going to get arrested real fast, even if it's in the name of a dance party. But if your last name is Wigfall and you wear a wig and you're still a dude, but you dress like a woman and your package falls out, it's okay. Apparently, that's okay as long as it happens, especially in front of children. You tell me if this country hasn't lost its mind in allowing the public school system to take over parenting and to take over your children. Also, the whole Latinx thing, by the way, that's not working. After gender neutral Latinx, is that how you say it? Fails to catch, because Latinx refers to...
It doesn't make sense because it's supposed to say that there's gender neutral instead of saying Latina and Latino. It doesn't make sense because Spanish is a language that is gendered.
Yes.
That's the whole
just
point.
Like French. I mean,
Right.
Words have genders.
Yeah.
Nouns have either a masculine or feminine
Right.
position in the language itself. So it's so Latinx. So after gender neutral Latinx fails to catch, wokesters try a new letter. I believe that every time they use the term Latinx, they lose another Latino vote, says one person. Due to the astonishing lack of success of the gender-neutral term Latinx within the Latino community, left-wing culture police have premiered a brand new term, Latin, Latina, Latine. It's kind of like latrine, but it's Latin. Wonder how that's going to catch on in the conservative, socially conservative Latino community. Probably not very well, I'm just saying. So here's the thing. The Democrats are searching for a message. And as they search for this message, they're trying to run away at the federal level with Biden and Psaki and the other Democrats in the United States Senate, the United States Congress, away from what's really happening in the classroom and saying that children that are LGBTQ plus are going to be separated and segregated, when in fact we know exactly what they're doing. And it's all the stuff that I just described. Drag queen dance parties with a man exposing himself to children, or certainly has done it many times before in other kinds of venues. And apparently that's okay, as opposed to a man who doesn't have the wig on, who does it, who would, of course, be arrested, rightfully so, by the way, right away. So the Democrats are doing everything they can to destroy the nuclear family and to destroy childhood, the innocence of childhood. They want to go away. And you have to ask yourself the question, why would someone do that? Why would someone think that's okay to destroy the innocence of childhood, the innocence of all that is wonderful about raising children? And that's because Democrats don't believe in the family. They don't believe in the nuclear family. They don't believe in the traditional family. In fact, they believe in grooming children. They really do. And they have proven it with their policy positions, and they have proven it with what they're doing to the public school system. And that includes in conservative districts and in Democrat districts, because the Democrats quickly take over school boards and make sure they implement this crazy stuff as fast as they possibly can. So next up, podcast listeners, Janet Yellen says, quote, spending actually did cause inflation. So Janet Yellen, who said, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago that inflation was transitory, meaning that inflation was temporary. It was just like a passing thing, inflation, and it was going to go away in just a couple of months. Now says, you know what? All that spending that the federal government did under Biden, yeah, it did feed inflation. That's her way of saying it did feed. No, it did cause inflation. President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan did contribute to inflation. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen conceded on May 4th. Speaking in an interview with Matt Murray, editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal, the former head of the Federal Reserve said the White House's enormous spending did play a role in the current inflationary environment, noting that it was justified because of the various economic risks. Quote, so, look, inflation is a matter of demand and supply, and the spending that is undertaken in the rescue plan did feed demand, Yellen said. She said inflation, which is at a 40-year high, is an intended or unintended consequence. Once again, she said inflation, which is at a 40-year high, is an unintended consequence of the Biden administration attempting to avoid a sharp economic downturn and facilitate full employment. I have to stop here because this is the Treasury Secretary still having Joe Biden's back because she doesn't really fundamentally believe in our economic system. And why do I say that? Because, folks, there are so many jobs in the United States of America right now that aren't being filled. And there are so many people that are going from job to job that the economy is so overheated. It is so incredibly overheated. So many people not working to be paid not to work, okay? So many jobs that need to be filled. And it's because government has pushed so much currency into the economy, so much government spending, that it's going to take years to fix this problem. I am convinced. And so Yellen says that inflation, which is at a 40-year high, is an unintended consequence of the Biden administration attempting to avoid a sharp economic downturn and facilitate full employment. Folks, if you really wanted to facilitate full employment, you know what you would do? You would cut welfare off to those who are able-bodied. You would keep welfare in place. All of the welfare programs you would keep in place, at least for as long as you could, for those who simply need the help. Of course, you would do that. All right? But you should cut it off, welfare off, to those who are able-bodied. So if you want to facilitate full employment, it's not the spending that is required. What's required is to stop paying people to do nothing who are able-bodied. And you hear this from employer after employer after employer. But what does Janet Yellen say? Oh, no. She says the real issue here is that Biden just didn't really mean to set off inflation because he figured if he just spent a lot of extra money, what would ultimately happen is that we would get to full employment. And that was well worth the massive amount of government debt and inflation that we're going through today. Yellen also said that the fiscal stimulus and relief package had to support the labor market in response to the many dire forecasts. Quote, but I do think it was justified and appropriate at the time, given the risks the economy faced, she said. At the time that President Biden was inaugurated, we had an economy where forecasters were envisioning very high unemployment for a very long time. Yeah, and it was caused by government. Government shutting down businesses under essential and non-essential, and then government doing what? Paying people to stay home. Okay? And it's continuing to this day. So there's also signs of slowing still with all of the government spending and the out-of-control inflation. There are signs of slowing. Unemployment remains unchanged as economists predict dim future. This is in the Daily Caller. And we'll finish with this. The U.S. economy added 428,000 jobs in April. That's a lot, by the way, okay, to be fair. While the unemployment rate was unchanged at 3.6%, according to Department of Labor data released Friday. The number of unemployed people remained even at about 5.9 million Americans, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Well, of course, that doesn't tell you the real unemployment rate, which is much higher because these are the people in the real unemployment rate that are being paid to not work. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported this. Economists projected 400,000 Americans would be added to the payrolls. So this was higher. The labor market continues to barrel along, Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, told CNBC. We need it at this point in time to slow down a bit because we're going to blow past full employment and inflation is going to become a bigger problem than it already is. Ultimately, we need to get to do something.
That's closer to no more than 100,000 people who were gaining jobs a month. Much of the job gains in April came in the leisure and hospitality sector. While the construction, information, and government sectors had muted job growth. The report showed. Well, that's because you can't get materials because of inflation. Too much money. And of course, the Biden administration is saying it's because of supply chain problems. The total number of U.S. employees reached 151.4 million in April, inching closer to the pre-pandemic February 2020 level of 152.5 workers. So folks, the problem here is obvious. The economy is way overheated. On the one hand, you're very happy to see people get higher wages, and you're very happy to see people, of course, gaining in jobs, and the country gaining jobs, and more people getting onto the payrolls. The problem is the government has spent so much money, and there's so much money in circulation, that inflation is truly out of control. And that is not even close to the entire problem, because now Biden and Obama, of course, who's really running the show, want to, wipe out your student debt? I mean, imagine. So that would be injecting at least $1 trillion into the economy of more cash. Because right now, in theory, we hope, if you took out a loan and you graduated while in college, and you graduated from college, and now you're starting to pay back that loan, if that all is the case, and you spread that across the economy, it's well over $1 trillion of student debt. I think it's $1.6 trillion of student debt in total. Okay? And Biden is being pushed by Obama behind the scenes to eliminate that student debt so that those individuals will now vote Democrat, number one. And now, of course, they're not going to pass this before the election. They're going to promise it before the election and say, well, if you elect us after we win, then we'll pass it. They're not going to pass it before. They're going to try to get you to go to the polls to encourage you to go so that if they get reelected, then they'll pass it. And doing so would be the equivalent of injecting $1.6 trillion into the American economy. Ladies and gentlemen, if you think inflation is bad now, these people don't care what they do to the economy. All they care about is political power. And that is the point of that segment. That government spending caused the inflation. Even Janet Yellen is saying that. And the Joe Biden and Barack Obama don't care. They're all about making it even worse as long as they stay in power. And that's the last word from Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.